Hi, this is Peter Bollen and today I'm going to talk to you about starch. Starch is the main ingredient that we find in cereals like oats, barley, corn and wheat. If you look at the starch molecule, it's a long combination of sugars and it's digested in the body into small sugars. Starch is the most important energy source in equine nutrition, especially for horses doing short intensive work, like for example a jumping horse, a cutting horse. This kind of work, there starch is the main energy source. If you look at this image, you can see the upper part is anaerobic work, so this means short, intense work. And there, if you see left up, grains are, out of the grains starch is used. Starch is built down to sugar. Sugar to simple sugar is glucose. Glucose is transformed to glucose 6-phosphate, what is transformed to ATP in the body. And this ATP is the energy source. ATP then is transformed to ADP and energy in the body. But this is pretty complicated. If we look to the bottom side, there you have the aerobic cyclus, that is more long work, like for example an endurance horse. And there we see that the horse uses more fat in the ration, but also part of the energy comes still from the starch. It is important to know that different cereals have a different degree of digestibility of the starch. If you look to raw oats and raw wheat, they have the best digestible starch. Their starch is about 80–85% digested. However, if you look to corn and barley, there the starch is only digested for 35–40%. The next image shows the digestive system of the horse to explain you how the starch is digested in the horse. First, it goes through the mouth, from the mouth to the stomach. Horse has a very small stomach, and in that stomach there is an acid situation who breaks down, who does the first breakdown of the starch molecules. Then the starch goes from the stomach into the small intestine, where enzymes are active, and these enzymes will break down the starch into glucose, and there it has to be absorbed into the blood as to bring energy to the horse. However, what we see, and there actually is where starch can be dangerous, if we feed big amount of starch, some of the starch will not be digested in your small intestine and not absorbed there, and will go to the large intestine. And there, in that large intestine, this starch will cause problems because there microorganisms are living, and they feel only happy at a certain acidity. It's a pH of 6.7, that's a certain acidity. When there is coming too much starch to that large intestine, it will change the acidity, and the microorganism will not function good anymore. These microorganisms actually are responsible for fiber digestion. When they don't function good anymore, the risk for colics will be much bigger, and also the fiber digestion will not be so good anymore. Let's talk about why so many people think starch is bad. In the past, in the US, main ration of a horse was corn and alfalfa. That was like a traditional horse ration. However, corn contains a very bad digestible starch. As I said in the beginning, the starch in corn that is not treated is only digestible for 35–40%. So what happens when you feed a lot of corn? Much of the starch in that corn will not be absorbed in your small intestine because it's very low digestible, and it fluctuates into your large intestine where it causes the problems to the acidity. It will get more acid in the large intestine and your microorganism will not function good anymore. What we see is higher risk for colics, like obstruction colics and gas colics. There is another problem by feeding high amounts of starch, is that when you feed high amounts, the acidity in the stomach will get very high, and because of this acidity, the risk for stomach ulcers will increase also very much. How do you make starch safe? It's Presco. Let me explain you the Presco process. Presco is a treatment of the cereals that makes the starch much more digestible. How is the process? The cereal go into a bin with very high pressure, 15 to 20 bars, so really high, and then it's like the cereal explode, so the pressure go back to 1 bar, and at that moment the starch get gelatinized, which makes it extremely digestible and safe for the horses. This image shows a microscopic view of different treatments used to improve starch digestibility in cereals. If you look to the first line, you see untreated corn. So you can see all the starch is like it's like balls. The second line shows us micronized corn. There you see there is still half of the starch is in balls, but some of these balls are opened already, which means that they are better digestible. The third set of images shows us extruded corn. There you see there is still some balls, but more of the starch is opened, so it's higher digestible already. A disadvantage of the extrusion process is the very high temperature, which is destroying proteins and vitamins. Then if we look to the fourth set of images, there we see the Presco processed cereal. As you can see, all the starch is ripped very open and is very high digestible. So here you really can see the difference in different treatments. Actually, you can compare it to human nutrition. A good example is a potato. Potato is rich in starch. We boil or bake potatoes. Do you eat raw potatoes? If you don't, why would you feed raw cereals to your horse? So the Presco process, to give you an idea, an example, in corn, it is increasing the gelatination from untreated corn from 20% to Presco corn treated to 90% gelatination. So this means that the digestibility of the starch increase almost by 50%. What does this mean for our horse? First, if you feed higher amounts of cereals to the horses, all your starch will be absorbed in your small intestine, so this starch is very safe. There is no risk from starch that flux into your large intestine and cause all the problems that we have been telling before. Secondly, we see that the Presco process is increasing also very much the viscosity of the cereal. What does that mean? It means that the cereals will absorb much more water in the stomach. That means that they will go much slower through the digestive system of the small intestine. So it also means that the enzymes there have more time to digest the starch. So it's another reason why the increase of the starch digestion happens. And third, very important for the horse also, the process increases the palatability of the complete feed, which makes it more enjoyable for the horses. All cavalor feeds are safe, healthy and enjoyable, and that's part of our philosophy.